Well, hello everyone. My name's Dr. Simon Samoji. I hold the Arrell Chair in the Business of Food at the University of Guelph. And along with my colleague, Dr. Maria Corradini, who holds the Arrell Chair in Food Quality, we'd like to welcome you all to the second Arrell Food Business and Technology Forum. We're really excited to, once again, this day we're talking about smart retailing and how it relates to food. So over the next hour and a half, we've got a great set of panelists from industry, from academia, who'll be discussing how smart retailing intersects with their work, and also to giving their perspective of where they see smart retailing going in the future. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of the Indigenous people who have lived and worked here the longest. I'm talking to you today from the ancestral lands of the Attawandaran and Treaty Lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit. These are a part of Turtle Island, which is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty that reminds us all to share the bounty, the produce, the land itself with one another in a respectful manner. So today, each of our four panelists will be giving a brief overview of their work and how it intersects with smart food retailing. Following the conclusion of their presentations, which we'll be doing one by one, we'll open up questions from the audience. But before we get to our panelists, I'm going to hand it over to Maria. Maria.
Thank you so much, Simon, and welcome everyone. As Simon mentioned before, this event topic is smart retailing. Smart retailing refers to the hybridization between traditional shopping methods and modern technologies. It is basically an integration of multifaceted interfaces through which consumers and business interact using technological advances. Smart technology in food retailing typically covers the self-service space and information touchpoints. However, it doesn't stop there, since it also involves the technology that enables information acquisition and sharing, such as handheld or mobile applications during the purchasing at the point of sale, or even digitized labeling. Put simply, smart retailing involves an interactive shopping experience in a store with various technologies without the aid of a store attendant assistance and traditional checkouts. So today we will discuss those technologies and their business applications, including talking about their impact on consumers. We will hear from four exceptional experts that have been working on several aspects of this challenge. Simon and I will briefly present them. They will provide a short presentation that will cover 3 questions that we posed to them ahead of time, and that will allow us to gain insights into their areas of expertise and how it is being impacted by the emergence of smart food retailing, as well as the main opportunities, challenges, and future perspectives presented by this topic. Once the presentations are over, we will open the floor to the audience for questions. So we ask you to type your questions in the Q&A tool, and we will get to them as many as possible. Now Simon will introduce our first speaker.
Thank you very much, Maria. So firstly, we're very lucky to have Harshal Gore with us for our forum today. Harshal has been working for GS1 for over 20 years. GS1 is a non-for-profit company that has spearheaded the barcode, and we see barcodes on pretty much every product that you buy today, whether that be food or anything else that you might need to buy. Harshal previously worked at GS1 UK as the Industry Engagement Director, leading sectors such as grocery, food service, healthcare, marketplaces, and construction. Harshal is now working within the industry relations team at GS1, leading strategies on sustainability, traceability, 2D, and omni-channel. So with that, Harshal, we'll hand it over to you, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Simon, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here presenting to yourselves. So I'm going to give you an explanation of a bit about GS1, who we are. So let's just bring up the slides. And everyone can see that. Putting on share mode. So as Simon explained, I'm Harshal Gore, been working for GS1 as an organization for more than 20 years now. So just a little bit about kind of GS1. So GS1 is a neutral, not-for-profit organization that develops and maintains global standards for essentially efficient business communication. We were started in the 1970s because the retailers in the 1970s wanted to implement this new thing called the barcode. And now we all know we've been using the barcode for many years, but then there was a challenge that we could have multiple barcodes by multiple retailers. So the industry, the retailers actually, and the brands, we created something called GS1, which will be the not-for-profit organization that initially manages a single standard for the barcode, but then essentially off the back of that, many other kind of industry data and identification standards were developed over the last 40 to 50 years. We've got over 2 million companies in the world using GS1 standards. We got over 1 billion products using GS1 barcodes all around the world, and GS1 is in 114 countries around the world. So there's a GS1 office pretty much most of the countries around the world. There's 10 billion barcodes scanned every day, and we started in the grocery sector as a kind of a key area in terms of barcoding, data standards, supply chain standards, and efficiencies. But we're now in over 25 sectors, crossing multiple areas. And then recently, in the last 10 years, we've actually even gone into the healthcare sector where our standards being used. Essentially, at a very simple level, where GS1 helps the industry is we create the identification of products. We enable the capture of that product in terms of a digital, the digital twin, and we then allow for that information around that product to be shared between trading partners. And where GS1 really helps is that kind of one-to-many approach. So where you've got one manufacturer that wants to deal with 30 retailers, we want all those 30 retailers to be using GS1 standards. So you have one-to-many approach. So this is GS1's USP. And being a not-for-profit organization, we are run by the industry. So for example, I work for GS1 Canada now, and on GS1 Canada's board, we have retailers and brands and healthcare providers that are essentially deciding and defining what they want from standards and data sharing going forward. So a little bit more about GS1 Canada. So that was more about GS1 Global. So in Canada, we are in 5 sectors. We pride ourselves on data excellence, global data standards, and that one-to-many data sharing that I just described. But in Canada, what we also have is the platform to share that data. So we have like over 200 to 300 attributes that have been defined. And then those attributes, we put those attributes into something called the registry, where data providers, brands can put the data in and then share it to data recipients, whether it's in retailers and food service, etc. So it really becomes that kind of one-stop data sharing platform. And this makes us unique in Canada because we've enabled ourselves to move this forward. So just a bit of background in terms of GS1 as an organization and specifically what we're doing in GS1 Canada. In terms of kind of the organizers asked in terms of what are the main opportunities around smart food retailing. Obviously, with GS1's been in food retailing for 50 years now, and we're always looking at what's the next standards, what are the next technologies available to move us forward, because our members are asking us those questions as well. And from my point of view, kind of 4 big key areas that are coming up in my world at the moment. So the first one is the picture at the top left, which is recycling bottles or recycling packaging.
Harshal, I think the presentation didn't get into presenter mode. I think it's just still stuck on the first slide. It might not be in presenter mode yet.
Okay, let me see if I can. Shall I stop sharing?
Yeah, that might be the better way to do it.
And then I'll go back in. Thanks for that.
No worries.
Let me know if this works. Can you see that?
It's just coming up, and yeah, if it goes into presenter mode from there, it should be good.
Can you see that now?
You can see that. If you just put it into the presentation mode in the bottom corner, that should probably make it. I saw you clicked it and it doesn't want to click. Yeah. All right, we can see that now, so that's okay. It was just stuck on the first slide.
Okay, I'll stick outside of presenter mode. So let's stick with this.
That's fine. All good.
Oh yeah, brilliant. So one of the key areas that we're looking at in terms of smart food retailing is recycling, and the whole recycling and reuse and re-topic, because we've been looking at buy, move, sell, and putting products onto shelf. But this whole sustainability area in terms of how to recycle products that are recyclable and then putting it back into the supply chain. So this is where kind of GS1 standards can be used, GS1 data standards can be used to make sure traceability of those recycled products can be traced all the way back, and also be recycled back into in terms of creating new material or less virgin plastic material. So that's kind of one area where there's kind of opportunities. The other area which is really important for GS1 now is on the top right, which is you've got the scanning of the barcode number, but now you've got the scanning of QR codes. So GS1 internationally has now a global strategy around how do we move to line barcodes to 2D, what we call 2D barcodes or QR codes over the next 3 years. So we've got a project called Ambition 2027, which is looking at how the whole world move to this 2D or QR code approach, because on the 1D barcode, you can only scan the product and it will tell you what in the price lookup on the point of sale till they'll tell you how much it costs. With the QR code, there's a lot more information in there in terms of, for example, best before date and batch lot, but also consumer can scan the QR code with their mobile phone, and that will bring up a lot more information around sustainability and allergens and nutritional information. So as a strategy, we're looking at how do we create that one standard around the QR code for the consumer goods packaging industry. So the other area that's critical for us at the moment is the bottom left, which is around consumer, kind of informed and protected consumer, because the consumer is now needing more information around a product. And when you look at a product and you pick it up, and my eyesight's not that great these days, it's very hard to look at all the labeling information. So if you've got an allergy, which I do have, it's, you want to be absolutely sure that that product doesn't have a nut in it, and we want to be clear that does it contain nuts. So with the advancement of technology such as QR codes and having better data, which GS1 provides, we can enable the consumer with that information. And then finally, farm to fork, there is the whole area around traceability and product provenance and responsible sourcing. Again, back to the consumer. The consumer's needing a lot more insight in terms of that information. Where has that product been made? Has anyone been affected making that product? Recently, with the Canadian government, they're looking at child labor and things like that. So again, this is where data and identification and traceability is really important, and making sure the consumer's got the right information when they're making their choices. So they're the four kind of areas that I've focused on. And then the last slide, looking ahead, what is one future impact that you believe smart food retailing will have for our industry going forward? And it is absolutely the whole area around 2D barcodes, that whole migration from 1D barcode to 2D barcodes, and enabling the consumer with a lot more information, access to more information, but importantly, the industry, namely the retailers and the brands and the upstream suppliers, ensuring that the data they're collecting in the value chain is accurate, consistent, and presentable for the consumer, and it's correct. So this is an area that we're working as GS1 internationally. And I see that the final point here is I see personally going forward over the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a lot more innovation in store and online around enabling this product information to the consumers. And there's an example there of someone pointing at a product, and on the screen in front, it will tell that consumer where the products come from, the product provenance, the risk factor around those products. And again, all of that needs to be powered by really good, high quality data, which is again where GS1 enables our community. So yeah, to kind of conclude, it's all about identification, it's all about capturing, it's all about data sharing against a common global standard, where interoperability between different systems, and importantly, open global standards. So it allows for people from all multiple stakeholders to share information between themselves. So Simon, that's my conclusion to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Harshal. Very interesting to hear about what GS1 is doing, particularly the angle of 2D barcodes. And for everyone in our audience, I should mention that Harshal will have to be leaving us just before 1 or 2 p.m. our time Eastern. So when we finish our presentations and before we get to questions, if you have any questions for Harshal before he leaves, we'll make sure that he can answer them as best as he can in the time that he has. So thank you very much, Harshal. And we will move on to Rebecca Gordon. Rebecca manages the culinary projects at the Arrell Food Institute, and in her role, she oversees the Anita Stewart Memorial Food Laboratory, which sits within the Lang School of Business and Economics, but also is supported by the Arrell Food Institute. And she develops deep dish dialogue programs, which, if you haven't seen a deep dish dialogue, I urge you to do a YouTube search, and you'll be able to see them there. They're really cool, interactive events around food. And she also assists in AFI, or Arrell Food Institute, programming and events. She holds an MSc in Tourism and Hospitality from the University of Guelph, but has conducted numerous research projects on the restaurant industry on topics from job quality, sustainability, and what she'll be talking about today, which is about food delivery apps. And prior to completing her MSc, Rebecca spent several years managing restaurants, and she recently traveled to New York to cook at the prestigious James Beard House, and she's represented Slow Food Canada in Italy. So great to have you here with us, Rebecca, and I'll leave the floor over to you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. That's such a big introduction. And as you can tell, I do a lot of different things. And today I'm really going to be talking about the impacts of third-party food delivery apps from the perspective of the food service industry. So it was research that I conducted last year with the help of Dr. Simon Samoji and also Kimberly Thomas Francois. And it's really interesting to see how the food service industry has been able to adopt delivery apps, and how the growth of apps has really changed in the last couple of years. So just a quick little background in case you're unfamiliar. So when I'm talking about third-party food delivery apps, I'm talking about the companies that are able to act as orchestrators within that network. So they connect consumers to restaurants and also facilitate the actual delivery. So there are 3 big companies in Canada are Skip the Dishes, DoorDash, and Uber Eats. And so we have seen a lot of growth in the use of these apps. There's a 38% increase from 2019 to 2020. So obviously the pandemic really spurred that and got a lot of people using these apps, whether it was the restaurants participating or consumers trying them out. It's estimated that third-party food delivery apps will have an expected revenue of $12.7 billion by 2027, which is pretty considerable. So it's important that we are doing research and trying to understand how food delivery apps work and their role in the system. So as I mentioned, there is this app ecosystem where the third-party delivery apps are that coordinator between the 3 different parties, whether it's restaurants, couriers, or customers. The restaurants and customers are never able to actually directly communicate with each other. It's always through the delivery app. The delivery apps take fees from restaurants, so there's commission rates, and so those range from 10 to 35%, and that depends on the the restaurant size, also which app that's being used, and restaurant's ability to negotiate their rates. Couriers are able to make their money off of variable rates. Delivery apps are very strategic in the fact that they offer surge pricing to be able to get more couriers on the road when there's peak demand. And then customers are also charged a delivery fee from the delivery apps. So that's kind of the way that the delivery apps are able to make their money. So in a study that I conducted in 2022, I had a lot of different conversations with restaurant operators from a variety of different types of restaurants. So whether it was fine dining or more in the quick service sector. And I was able to discover that there was 3 key benefits as to what attracted these food service operators to use food delivery apps. The first one was that it's just so convenient for customers to use. Customers are expecting restaurants and food service operations to actually have food delivery apps. And so restaurants felt like they needed to have them in order to stay competitive and not lose their customers. Secondly, food delivery apps are able to provide a network to these restaurants. So there's very low barriers to entry. When using a food delivery app, the restaurants also are able to save a lot of time because they don't have to coordinate with consumers or delivery drivers. And also a really big draw was that idea that these food delivery apps are so well known and people will search and you may be able to connect with new customers. And that opens up the opportunity then to improving sales. It's another channel for restaurants to be able to use to be able to generate sales. And then there were a lot of challenges that were mentioned from restaurant operators. So a key one being that they were not happy with the food quality when they are putting food out for takeout in the food delivery apps. So the temperature is hard to maintain because we don't necessarily have the best packaging. The texture of food can also change while traveling, and restaurant operators really felt like they weren't proud of the food that they were sending out with food delivery apps. There were also some technology issues. With customer modifications, restaurant operators would find that people would order an item, but then they would modify it completely, and it wouldn't really translate through the delivery app, and it would cause issues with pricing, and it's very hard to then be able to communicate back to that customer because they aren't the restaurants aren't the first point of contact. And then there's also a lot of struggles with the technology, with just the integration with the different point of sale systems in the restaurants. So a really large company, like say McDonald's, they have people and strategies in place to be able to create extra technology that can help integrate into their point of sale system to make using a food delivery app efficient. But then those smaller companies that are maybe small businesses, independents, they don't have that ability or access to technology to help them. So there needs to be easier ways for food delivery apps to be able to be used. And then another issue was the service quality issues. So restaurant operators mentioned that there's sometimes issues where they have the food ready, but the couriers aren't there. That can usually happen during peak periods or really late at night. And there's a lot of issues with if a problem happens with a customer, it's really challenging to be able to rectify that because, again, you're going through that food delivery app. And then I think the biggest challenge that food operators are faced with using food delivery apps is that for many, it's unprofitable to use them. So a lot of restaurant operators said that they're actually losing money whenever they are fulfilling a food delivery order. And that's because the commission fees are too high. Many of the operators that I interviewed said that they actually need the commission rates to be around that 10% mark or lower, but they're getting charged that 30%. So that's where in the restaurant industry, you are already working with really small profit margins. So it is very challenging to be able to then take a cut out to be able to pay the food delivery apps and still be able to make money. And so there's this big question, will food service businesses continue to use food delivery apps? And really, I think that food delivery apps are here to stay, but it does depend on what kind of restaurant that you have, the more value that the food delivery apps provide, the more likely they are to use them. So restaurants that are more geared towards takeout and they have that food that can travel well, or in operations where there is nowhere to sit, like in a ghost kitchen, a food delivery app makes a lot of sense, but maybe not so much for fine dining, where the focus is more on the experience of dining and also the food does not travel well. It also, I think, depends on the size of the restaurant group. The groups that are much larger in size and have the ability to invest in technology that can assist them in using food delivery apps and also training to become more efficient are more likely to be able to adopt and see a lot more growth and potential with food delivery apps. And so this is now just kind of based on my own personal opinion about where will food delivery apps go in the future? How will they be impacted? So I definitely think that food delivery apps are here to stay. I think that the restaurant industry needs to learn how to live with it because consumers do expect food delivery apps to be available. I think food delivery apps can be really great because they can provide new opportunities and channels for people to sell their food and be found. I think that could maybe especially be true for someone who has maybe something like a ghost kitchen and they're trying out a new business kind of idea. The ability that food delivery apps provide is that there are low barriers to entry, which makes it a lot less of a hard commitment for new opportunities to be able to come through. But then there's always this little bit of a debate about how will this impact society if we continue to grow the use of food delivery apps. So I think we are really, as consumers, driven by convenience right now. We want our food quickly. We don't have time to cook. So that growth is going to continue to come, but at what cost will that have? I do get a little bit worried, will we lose our sense of how to prepare food and food skills? Or if we are always being able to have this right at our fingertips to be able to order food. I also think that there's a lot of future impacts probably around policy and regulation as food delivery apps grow. A lot of restaurant operators, when I talked to them, said that they don't want any regulations actually put on the food delivery apps. But they do want to see increased competition. So because there's only really 3 big names in the food delivery app world and here in Canada, and we've seen a few exit in Canada, that's given them a lot more power and the ability to dictate high commission rates. So I think we need to see some new models coming in, some new companies to be able to make sure that we are finding a model that is profitable for both the delivery app companies and also the restaurants. So again, I do think food delivery apps will continue to be here. I do think they will continue to grow, but I think that we need to do a little bit more investment in technology and really think through ways that we can make sure that everyone in the system, whether it's the consumers, the restaurants, and the drivers, are being properly cared for and given benefit to being able to use them. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Very interesting discussion about where we see a very important part of smart retailing, which is food delivery apps, where we see it going and its sustainability. And I think it was great work that you did last year with us. And I think it was great having you here today to explain to everyone in our audience exactly what was done. So thank you very much. So we've had 2 of our panelists today already, and with that, I'm going to hand over to Maria Corradini, who will take us through the last 2 panelists.
Thank you so much, Simon. Now we will hear from Dr. Shonan Lu. Dr. Lu is the Ian and Jane Munro Endowed Chair in Food Safety at the Department of Food Science and Agricultural Chemistry at McGill University. Before that, he was the Assistant and Associate Professor at the Faculty of Land and Food Systems at the University of British Columbia. His research focuses on food safety and food microbiology, and his lab develops innovative and rapid sensing instrumentation systems and detection methods for ensuring food safety. He's currently also the editor of Trends in Food Science and Technology. Thank you, Shonan, for joining us.
Thank you, Maria, for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to join this forum and share some of my opinions regarding this very emerging topic. So I will share my slides. So the topic of my presentation today is related to an emerging concept called smart food safety. And this concept was initially brought up by US FDA a couple of years ago. So US FDA talked about a new concept called the new era of the smart food safety. They provided a blueprint which is centered around 4 different core elements. So the first one is called technical enabled traceability. And the second one is called smarter tools and approach for the prevention and outbreak response. And the third one is the new business models and the retail modernization. And the last one is...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you don't seem to be in the presentence mode. We are just seeing the... Oh, perfect.
All right now?
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you.
And the last one is about the food safety culture. So today I want to introduce 2 examples of the technology developed in my research group, which is related to the smart food safety. So the first one is a equipment that my lab developed a couple of years ago, which is a portable Raman spectrometer. So Raman spectroscopy is a non-destructive vibrational spectroscopic method that can be used for rapid and high throughput screening of the food quality and safety. It has been used in the laboratories for a lot of years. And during the past decade or so, either the portable device or the handheld device of the Raman spectrometer has been emerging because it can be carried into the field or for the on-site inspection of the food commodities. So in my research lab, we developed a new generation of the portable Raman spectrometer. So from the pictures, you can see the size of the Raman spectrometer that we developed is pretty small. The weight of this Raman spectrometer is about 2 kilograms. So you can easily carry this for on-site or in-field inspection. So for this portable Raman spectrometer, it has been coupled with a laser at the wavelength of 785 nanometer, which is the near infrared laser. And you can see from the prototype of this portable Raman spectrometer that we have 3 different layers of the control panels. So the bottom layer of the control panel is to control the performance of the laser. It will turn on and turn off the laser, and can also control the intensity of the laser. So the medium layer of the panel is to control the performance of the Raman spectrometer. And the top layer of the control panel is to share the collected Raman spectra while the iCloud system. So which means once you do the Raman spectral collection of the food commodities on-site or in the field, and then the collected Raman signal or the spectra can be immediately transferred to the central lab through the iCloud system to facilitate the further spectral collection and the data analysis. So the whole device can achieve high throughput, rapid, and non-destructive characterization of the food commodities. So the second example that I want to share with you is a recent research project that has been done in my research lab. So we developed a new next generation antimicrobial resistance surveillance system based on Internet of Things and the microfluidic lab on a chip. So many of us know that antimicrobial resistance, in short, we call it AMR, is a global crisis in the public health and also the economic growth. And so far, the characterization of antimicrobial resistance of pathogenic bacteria in the agri-food supply chain requires a very complicated and time-consuming inspection in the central lab. it also requires a lot of highly trained personnel to perform the testing for several days. So the motivation of our research project is to develop a new type of the surveillance system that can quickly identify the antimicrobial resistance characteristics in the agri-food chain, specifically to certain type of the foodborne pathogenic bacteria. So therefore, we can tremendously save the time, and then coupled with the Internet of Things, we can quickly share the data to different labs across the country in order to facilitate a better monitoring and surveillance of the pathogenic bacteria contamination in the agri-foods, especially those pathogenic bacteria are antimicrobial resistant. So this figure shows the schematic illustration of this next generation antimicrobial resistant surveillance system using the Internet of Things and the microfluidic technology to build. So the architecture of this Internet of Things have 4 different layers. So including a sensing layer, a computational analysis machine learning layer, a data transmission layer, and also a cloud server application layer. So in the sensing layer, as I showed here, the pathogenic bacteria strings isolated from different resources, such as the humans, the animals, or the foods, they will be tested in a colorimetric-based microfluidic lab on a chip. So if the AMR pathogenic bacteria existed in your clinical or environmental or food samples, then the color within the microfluidic device will change. And then with the AMR results being automatically analyzed using a pre-trained machine learning algorithms, the antimicrobial resistance results can be quickly transferred onto an iCloud server using the Wi-Fi. So a user-friendly website is also available to demonstrate the spatial and also the temporal trends of the antimicrobial resistance of the specific type of the pathogenic bacteria that harbor the antimicrobial resistance genes. So this is a new generation of the surveillance model to monitor the antimicrobial resistance of the pathogenic bacteria in our food supply chain. And hopefully, it will have the potential to be accepted by the Canadian government agencies such as CFA and Health Canada to facilitate the AMR monitoring in our agri-food system as well as the agri-food supply chain. So with that, I want to wrap up my presentation for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Xiaonan. It's very exciting to see how your lab is moving forward, our ability to contribute and pass that information that is key in order to ensure the safety system to the consumer. So with that, I will move to Greg. Our next speaker is Greg Ojiva. Greg is a fresh food and global supply chain executive. He's currently the president of Mike & Mike's Inc., a Toronto-based importer and distributor of more than 1,500 healthy food items, including organic produce, snack, and grocery products. Also, Greg is involved with several university and startup incubators in Canada and in the US, working with founders and entrepreneurs focused on finding solutions to feeding the world's growing population via food innovation and agtech. As the chairman of the CPMA's Education Committee, Greg supports the development of future leaders for Canada fresh produce industry. He also teaches supply chain and marketing courses at the University of Rhode Island, where he earned his undergraduate degree in international business. He earned his MBA at Queen's University and also holds a CPA designation. With that, we welcome Greg, and we are very happy to have you here.
Thank you, Maria. Very happy to be here. Thank you to Simon and Muriel behind the scenes for organizing all this. As Maria said, I work for a company called Mike & Mike. So we're a distributor of all sorts of healthy products, everything from organic coffee to vegan peanut butter cups and everything in between. And our core business is really organic produce. So we're supplying pretty much any retailer here in Ontario. We're based in Toronto. We supply most of the retailers in some form or fashion. So that's anything from your one or two location independent stores to the regional chains and the national chains. And we also do a lot of the online delivery services, which varies quite a bit from the food box and the meal kits to a lot of the click and collect, and some of the major retailers now have their own online platform. So I've spent the majority of my career on the supply side, and I'm going to kind of take a different approach to this whole conversation. Say, okay, how does this technology that's within the supply chain, how does it actually affect us as a supplier? How does it affect us today? How can it affect us in the future? And the big thing that I'm focused on is how can this technology solve the problems that we have? So for those of you who are joining us, who are maybe in this industry or work somewhere in the food supply chain, you'll be well aware that there are many problems. So I'm gonna focus on some of the bigger issues that affect my business and businesses like mine. So really the top three, and these will be related and some overlap here. So the big three issues that we have currently: shrink and food waste. The second thing is, how do you match production with what's being sold, what the consumers are buying, and that's really been disrupted with COVID. And then the third one, regardless of what industry you're in, the cost increases have been significant. And in particular, things that are coming into Canada, a lot of the food that we consume is not produced here, or it's produced maybe on the other side of the country. The shipping costs have increased a whole lot. Labor, those are really the two big drivers, but pretty much everything from rent to packaging, everything has crept up. And what all these things kind of together lead to is it's become more difficult to figure out what should be brought in and what's ultimately going to be sold. And the increases in costs have put the retail prices up. So the consumer might not even be aware of it. If you take, say, a green apple or something, the consumer might have walked into the supermarket and just sort of had a look at it, put it in their cart, might not know what the price is. It's not a staple like bread or milk or something where they might know the cost. But now if they see that same green apple and it's $3.49 a pound or more, $3.99 or $4, they're saying, okay, I don't remember the price, but that seems expensive, and they're passing that up. So to answer the first question that was asked to me, it's how has it been impacted? How has smart food retailing impacted my business to date? I would say not quite. There's not really been an impact since we're still coming out of COVID and trying to find that stability. Yeah, and I think we all agree that COVID changed a lot of things. I think some of these trends were happening, but COVID sort of acted as a catalyst. And to quote a professor former professor of mine at Queen's, said this is punctuated equilibrium. His name is Barry Cross, and it's kind of one of these events in history where it's sort of changed probably for good, and we're trying to figure out what does the post-COVID consumer look like? How are they going to buy? Are they going to continue to eat the green apple if it's $3.99, et cetera? So that's kind of where we are at the moment. And as I said at the beginning, my focus really is, how do we solve those problems? The three problems I spoke about, it's how does this technology help us solve that problem? And it can't just be, to quote another friend of mine, Dr. Martin Gooch, he said, it can't just be a solution searching for a problem. And I think that could be an issue with technology, where there's so much technology, but again, how is it actually helping solve these problems? So to answer the next question, the main opportunities and challenges, sort of look at it either way. So if you look at some of the things like shrink and food waste, for instance, there's some companies that are doing some awesome things in this space. Verdant Technologies, Hazel, they're doing things that extend the shelf life of fresh produce, which really makes an impact, because depending on what report or study you read, the percentage, a high percentage, a shockingly high percentage of the produce that we produce in Canada and around the world ends up not being consumed, ends up being dumped or what have you. And that's an issue. So the technologies they have implemented are really helping to extend the shelf life. However, I believe the fundamentals can be improved such that we move through the produce more efficiently. And so I think the main opportunity here is for us to find collaboration in the market through all the main stakeholders, starting really at every level, but I'm going to kind of focus on the main retailers. How do they get together and say, okay, what is sort of a method for us to be able to move things a little bit quicker and through the supermarket, so on shelf and off shelf just as quickly? And I think certain things, like if you look to the UK, for instance, the retailers in that market, it's a similar market to Canada in that there are a handful of large retail companies that dominate and a smaller portion of independents and regional players. But things like food safety, they've come together and said, okay, let's try and standardize. There's still some element of customization, but let's try and standardize the food safety so that, for instance, somebody like me, I'll go to South Africa, I'll work with some of these exporters, these farmers, and they'll say, please don't make another custom food safety inspection. You already do 17 of them. So the UK's done a pretty good job saying, okay, we understand that, and it's a way for us to ensure, that we're all speaking the same language, but also to make it more efficient to reduce costs. So I think collaboration here in Canada is something that would really help us a lot more. Then some of the technologies that I want to talk about that I think will make an impact in solving some of the problems that I spoke to earlier. The first thing is the 2D QR codes that Arrell spoke about earlier. There's a lot of new varieties that are coming into the market. It's always a challenge for us to educate the consumer on why this variety is better than the other. And I think QR codes, they have been around for a while, but if we could sort of standardize, and I'm sort of speaking, to across the whole supply chain, try and standardize it so consumers are more used to using QR codes with all the information that's in there. It's just such a wealth of knowledge, such a great asset to put on the packaging. I think in the future, consumers will get used to it, and it'll be easier to promote, the variety, to educate the consumer on, why it's grown, why it's fresh, best before, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about that technology. And in the same vein, samples have always been a huge driver, at least in the fresh produce category. And for the most part, COVID kind of put that on hold. And from a consumer point of view, me going into the supermarkets, I don't see that really coming back post-COVID as strongly as it once did, with the exception of maybe Costco. And that's one of the reasons my kids love to go to Costco is because they get all these free samples. So that's kind of come back a little bit. And I understand there's all sorts of food safety and contamination and all that kind of concern. And I saw something recently. It's a company called Uptaste out of Montreal, where they've built a machine that automates the sampling process. I've not seen it be used yet in the fresh department, but I think in the future it makes a lot of sense to reduce the labor of somebody having to be there to make sure the food safety and those sort of concerns are addressed. But it's really important to get a new produce variety into a consumer's mouth. If it's good, it usually walks out of the store with that consumer. So I'm excited about that technology. And then the third thing that I just wanted to mention here that sort of jumped out is there's a company called Piccadilly, which I believe is a European company, but I see they've launched in the US. And what their technology is smart salad bars or food bars. And again, it takes care of a lot of the food safety concerns that existed before COVID, but sort of put it on steroids, if you will, during COVID. So it takes care of that. But what it does really well that's interesting is that it could see the different levels of food and the freshness to some extent and automatically reorder, because food waste is a big issue with food bars and salad bars. So this is a technology I think really will have an impact in helping keeping the produce and the fresh food moving through the chain. So that's really to wrap up. I am excited about the future of smart food retailing, and I do think a lot of this technology is going to be a benefit to solving the problems that I've spoken about a few times here. I think that's my main message, is that the collaboration at all levels through the supply chain, but really starting at the retailers, they're the ones when they see that benefit, it really trickles down through the supply chain. So collaboration is as important as the tech, and I truly believe the benefit will trickle down through consumers and having fresher food on shelves, and in time at a lower price once we figure out the technology that really moves the needle. So thank you. Thanks for joining me on this. That concludes my section of the presentation. So I'll hand it back to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Greg. I think that you provided a very nice oversight of how the industry sees their contribution, or the contribution of smart retailing technologies to their daily operations. So now we are going to open it to the public and to and make the Q&A feasible for all of us. We have already been receiving some questions, so I think that we can pose it to our panelists. So we ask our panelists to turn on their cameras, and we can start with some of the questions that have arrived for them.
Thank you, Maria. I'll start the ball rolling, and I know Harshal has to leave us in a few minutes, so I'll start with you, Harshal, and a question that we received from the audience, and that is, looking at the next generation of barcodes, or QR codes, which is designed to give more information to the consumer. Will they have the ability to have third-party verification that is increasingly required for products that have claims such as sustainability?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, the answer is yes, because the ability of the kind of QR code is to, when the consumer scans the QR code, it can link to a website, and ultimately it will be the brand's website, and on the brand, they can put the credentials on their website in terms of the third-party verification. So what I'm seeing is a movement, or kind of a vision from the industries. There's not much space left on the label, so the more we can put, more of the information on the pack we can make digitally. That's kind of where we need to go, and the QR code will be the link between the physical product and the kind of digital representation. Now, the key question is the validation or the verification of the claim, which is a kind of a separate discussion. But with the technology we have now, you can actually even certify the logo digitally to say that actually that there is an authenticated logo of that certification claim. So I do believe that's where it's going to go.
Thank you, Harshal. I think it's very interesting technology where you have today where almost, well, I'll go and say 99% of all products are purchased with a barcode, and we see them on everything from food to computers and everything in between. But we give them very little thought, and the complexity behind them that allows us to purchase but also provide information. I think if there was one message you could give from your discussion today when it comes to the next generation, which are, as you said, the QR codes, the 2D codes, what do you think are the biggest issues that the adoption of those new 2D codes presents to the supply chain and to consumers?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a live conversation for me and some of the retailers and brands right now. I guess linked to kind of what Greg was talking about earlier as well, was that the worst situation for me is you have like 10 QR codes on the packaging. So one for sustainability, one for recycling, one for nutrition, and I could potentially, I could see that happening, but as an industry, we need to stop that from happening. And I think the benefit of what we're looking at globally by having a GS1 kind of enabled QR code is you have one QR code, which then can go to different data sets. the way some of the kind of government conversations are going and some of the industry conversations that are going is saying we need a QR code for recycling and put the QR code in the recycling area. Then we need a QR code for allergen, put the QR code for the allergen area. Actually, we need to step away from that and say, actually, we need one QR code which can reference different data sets. So that's the opportunity and challenge in front of us as an industry.
Thank you very much, Harshal. And I think you might have to leave us in a few minutes. So thank you very much for being at our event today. And I think the audience learned a lot about a very important topic for smart retailing going forward. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
And with that, I'm going to move on to Rebecca, who was talking about food delivery apps and their complexity within the food retail or smart retailing ecosystem. And obviously, it's a touchy topic with a lot of discussion in the media around how food delivery apps and their margins or their business model is heavily reliant on taking significant funds from retailers. And you showed in your presentation a lot of different aspects to food delivery apps where there is a business model going forward, and I think we'd all agree they're going to be here for the long term. So are there any? So I will say, are ghost kitchens the future of quick service food retailing, or is it something else that you think, and obviously it's an opinion, but you think going forward are going to be where food delivery apps see their most business from?
That is a good question. So I do think it's important that the food that is being delivered is food that can travel well. And so I think there's a lot of improvement that we need to do to be able to get a lot of different sectors to participate and making sure that the food quality is good. So I think, we need investment in packaging to make sure that the texture and quality of the food maintains. But as far as it goes for the business model and where will it go, I actually think that there may be some new ways to look at how the business model of food delivery apps currently run with the third-party model. I think in theory it works really well, but then when it comes down to it, it all comes down to the cost. And I think there's some models that are being tried out, like a cooperative model. I know that was tested here in Guelph, where a bunch of different restaurants collaborated together and tried to pool their resources to be able to lower their costs. We're also seeing different people try different things out, but really, we need to find a way to figure out how to lower those commission fees. How can we make the food delivery apps more efficient? So right now, delivery apps aren't even profitable, which I think is an issue right there for sustainability. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to find ways to streamline things and make processes better so that we're able to save money and those commission rates can come down.
Thank you, Rebecca. I think it's an evolving space, and I think we're not quite at that point where we can understand what food delivery apps bring to the food service the food service sector long term. But I think we all agree that they're here for the long term. So thank you, Rebecca. I'll move it over to Maria for the next set of questions.
Yeah, and the next set of questions will come for Xiaonan. This one is the question also from the audience. Basically, they are interested in knowing, as there is an increasingly rely on technology and systems to support the smart food supply chain, what has been done to mitigate the security challenges that we face that are increasingly creeping, into our supply chains because of nefarious actors? And I think that this one has to do with food identity and food bioterrorism. This can happen now from farm to gate through the market players. So, Xiaonan, is there something that can be done in terms of that, how technology can support preventing us and sheltering us from these risks?
Mute.
Xiaonan, you're mute.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem.
So as we all know that the entire food supply chain is very complicated, and from the farm to the table or to the fork. There are so many different steps in between. And sometimes the food supply chain is not transparent at all. So that's why no matter for the government or for the industry or for the academia, it's very difficult to obtain sufficient information to get a very transparent food supply chain. So that's why we always have the challenge for food safety or food authentication, or even for the food bioterrorism. I think a key thing is the three parties, the government, the academia, and also the industry need to collaborate together and try to make the entire food supply chain to be more transparent. And another comment is, although we already have a lot of technology and equipment that can facilitate the high throughput and the rapid screening of the agri-food products, many of those are still not portable or handheld, which means we still need to heavily rely on the central laboratories. And in this case, it's very challenging to get a lot of data or a large number of the samples to be screened in a relatively short time of the period. That's why the turnaround time from the sample that we received to the result is still relatively long. So if we can continuously advance the technology, minimize the sensors and the equipment, and make a lot of those to be portable and handheld, that can help the entire agri-food industry a lot. And the last comment will be the one I just present, how we can integrate the hardware with the software way better. IoT for sure is a very important concept that for sure will be integrated with food safety in future, but also we should think about, for example, blockchain and some other type of the new big data analytical science. Those have a lot of potential that can be harmonized with the hardware together to improve our food supply chain to be more integral and to be more safe. I think that's all from me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I agree with you that basically the moving forward of technology at different levels is something that will allow to protect our systems much better. So now we have received a question that I think that Greg can be help us with. So one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation, Greg, is that, yeah, technology is fantastic, you know, but how much is the willingness of the customer and the retailer to introduce them? So one of the questions actually is based on that. Most of these barcodes work amazingly well, but is there any kind of insights that you have or studies that you have seen in how customers are willing to spend time in knowing more about the product when it's at the grocery store or when it's receiving from you? And if it's specifically there are some products that they're really caring about. I guess that, for example, in your case for organic products, there might be much more interest.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say in general, consumers do want to know. They're curious. And yeah, they reach out to us all the time about stuff. And I think if you look at some of the packaging, even many of the products we carry, I think sometimes there's probably too many messages. They're trying to learn about the product, and you have, you know, non-GMO and vegan and sugar-free or whatever. It becomes, there's so many messages that I think the main message becomes somewhat diluted or even ineffective. And I think back to the point that I made earlier, and the other panelists kind of touched on this. It's like, if the QR codes, it's not a new technology. It's just not widely adopted by the consumer, and many of them don't even realize they're there. And I can give plenty of examples of products we've used, a new variety of this, or social impact food brand where you could speak directly to the farm workers, and we'll get emails or something afterwards saying, I didn't even know this was here. I'm sitting on my couch and I just said, well, I'll scan this for fun. And there's a video or there's some sort of information. So I do think once the retailers in particular, again, that's the level that really can affect change and really change the policy. But once they see the benefit of being able to speak directly to the consumer and cramming all that information into a QR code, I think we're going to start to see a technology like that, probably QR codes, where it's more consistent and standard. When you walk into a supermarket, they're going to be telling the consumers, hey, check out these QR codes. and they're going to be, more plentiful. So that's what I think needs to happen for them to be more effective. Because again, they're there. It's just we need the retailers to kind of point an arrow in that direction and continue to encourage them to use it.
Yeah, continuously training, the customer on the resources that they have available for a particular product in order to learn more about them. I think that's one fantastic point. I think that we have enough time for another short round of questions. So I will pass it to Simon so he can make some questions for Rebecca.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, we've got about 9 minutes, so we might be able to do one question each per panelist, or our 3 panelists that are left. I'm going to move over come back to Rebecca again and drill in a little bit more about the study you did, and in particularly when you were talking with restaurant owners. And I know you did a lot of quick service restaurants because I was involved with the study. But I just thought give you an opportunity just to summarize or maybe even just reiterate some of the major hurdles that restaurants were seeing when it came to adopting food delivery apps as part of their business.
Yeah, so the hurdles, I think, so everyone was really excited about food delivery apps, and then also a pandemic hit, and they were just willing to accept them and adopt them without really too much thought. I think it was like kind of like, this is the one piece that we're going to be able to still make money and stay in business, and the food delivery apps are going to be our saving grace. But then over time, those little hurdles happen. So the service quality is a really big thing. These restaurant operators, everyone kept saying, I feel like I don't have any control anymore. The app is dictating everything that I'm doing. And so that comes in with the service quality. So they are handing the food over to a courier. They don't know what ends up happening. Does the courier go to multiple other stops before they drop the food off? They talked about how they gave the pizzas to the courier, and then the courier ended up delivering the pizzas vertically, and like all the cheese had fallen off. And it's like, if I was the one driving, I wouldn't have done that. Or if I'd trained the people, I wouldn't have done that. So that seems to be like that big hurdle. That's obviously there's that financial hurdle, but that big one is that lack of sense of control and being able to actually rectify any issues when they come up, because it all ends up being filtered through that food delivery app. And that can really have a big impact on a restaurant's brand reputation, and they could end up losing business that way.
Now, it's an interesting space where a restaurant or any business can't control how its food is presented. If you think about fine dining, it's very controlled so that food can be presented in exactly the way that the chef wants. Or all the back of house team want, but very different in the case of food delivery apps, where you're giving it to someone who doesn't work for your company to then ensure that they can get that product to the consumer in exactly the way possible. So there's a lot of trust in this system, isn't there?
Yes, a lot of trust. And I think the one thing that's really special, maybe a little bit more unique with the food service industry, is that it's focused on people and creating experiences, and technology can't substitute for that. So it makes it a little bit harder for sure.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to give it to Maria to ask Shannon's last question, and I'm going to finish off with Greg. So I'll just pass it over to you, Maria.
Yeah, and for the next question, Shannon, I know that you have so much information. It could take you, a whole seminar of its own to answer. But let's just try to keep it brief. And because someone has asked about the role of AI in making sense of this information. So if you can briefly, reflect on that, that would be fantastic.
Yes, AI for agri-food research is definitely trendy. As you see, a lot of food science department in North America are currently hiring new professors in this field. AI is a very big topic. Sometimes what I see right now for the trendy in the food science research is how we use the AI to analyze the data that we collected from the research works. For example, if you got the imaging data, previously you probably can only use a conventional machine learning methods to extract a certain information, but the data extraction efficiency is relatively low. But now with the power of the AI, then you can dig the data even more deep, right? So in this case, you can get more information that you can extract it from the data. Another field I see that is very trendy is you use the AI to make the detection or monitoring to be more automatic. So the automated monitoring is definitely a trend because it's not only for research, but eventually it can be adopted by the government to facilitate an automated monitoring of the agri-food commodity, probably in a very labor-free manner. So those are the two things I see that is really trendy of using the AI to study the food science right now.
Yeah, I think that you summarize it perfectly, in terms of monitoring, reducing the contributions, and even reducing errors, because of human error, for monitoring, it will be completely present there. So thank you so much, Yonan. Simon?
Thank you, Maria and Shannon. Greg, I'm going to ask the last question, and I'm going to be very blunt and open. I'll be fair on you. So your company is focused on, apart from other things, trying to get purchase orders from buyers for all the different products that you can supply to those buyers. And what sort of feedback do you get from those buyers as to what requirements they require around traceability and those sort of issues around how they can trace products? So that might be the major grocers or other of the buyers that you face. Is there much feedback around traceability?
There is, I would say, first of all, it does depend on the retailer. They all have like a slightly different flavor or approach to this. But something like food safety, it's not like a competitive advantage anymore. It's like you're expected to have it. And I think, so there's really nothing that separates our company from another. We have to have the highest food safety standards. And a lot of the buyers actually will assume that as well. And again, it depends on the retailer. Sometimes they have a separate, the bigger they are, it's a full team for food safety. So ultimately, you're looking at things like how do we stand out from other suppliers? And if food safety is sort of standardized and expected, sustainability is kind of moving that direction, and ESG, there's an assumption that your values align with the corporate values of whatever retailer it might be. And then the big thing is kind of coming back what I've been saying through my part of the presentation is like assuming those are all taken care of, because again, you need to tick those boxes to be a supplier. Then it's how efficient can you operate and ultimately get the lowest cost. And I think it's not all that sexy at the moment, but it's really how could you drive cost out of the chain and put a strong value in front of the consumers on shelves. That's the big question.
Thank you, Greg. And I think that's just the perfect point to wrap up of what we have talked about for the last hour and 15 minutes. So thank you all. I'm going to pass it over to Maria as we do our wrap up, which we'll both do, but you go first, Maria.
Well, thank you so much to all the participants for their involvement today, and particularly to the panelists for putting forward very interesting aspects and perspectives on this topic. I have learned a lot about new innovations in food safety, the importance of AI, traceability, and barriers that we face from the restaurant's point of view, from food producers, retailers, and even consumers to make these innovations and to pass them and make it a reality within the marketplace. And I hope that all of you have done so as well. So Simon, if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. I think I should mention a few things as well, that for those who've been here today, there will be a recording of this event and it will be posted on the Arrell Food Institute website that you can, if you search for Arrell Food Institute in Google, you'll find that. I should also mention that the Arrell Food Institute will be on again this year in November, in person in downtown Toronto, but also available to view live stream as well for those who cannot make it. So keep a lookout for an email about registration shortly. But if you haven't already signed up, I'd urge you to go to the Arrell Food Institute website and sign up for the mailing list, which you can find on the bottom left-hand side of the page. Lastly, but very importantly, I'd like to thank the Arrell Family Foundation. We've had Anne and Laura Arrell here with us today, and I'd like to thank them for their continual support of the Arrell Food Institute and the University of Guelph, because without their support, we would not be meeting today. So thank you very much. So with that, on behalf of Maria, I'd once again like to thank you for coming to our event, and we hope to see you all very soon. Thank you, everyone. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.